making another Bleach video. If you watched literally any of my previous videos, you know that Bleach 1000 Year Blood War basically has me foaming at the mouth at this point.
We do not care.
I want to look at 5 defining moments for Ichigo Kurosaki that solidify him, in my opinion, as the ultimate Chad. Not just in power, but in terms of character progression and story, all of it. Basically, these are the moments where I resonated with Ichigo as a character the most. These are the moments that won me over to his story and invested me in his struggles and his strife and his victories as well. And before I begin, I want to give a huge shout out to the channel Flame of Rebirth for his Ichigo series and his classic Cubology. That was a big inspiration for this video, and he has a lot of good points, excellent videos. Please go check out his channel and that Ichigo Rundown series. But without further ado, these are Ichigo's top 5 greatest moments. At number 5, we have the climax of the Soul Society arc where Ichigo saves Rukia. And before we take a look at that specific moment, I do want to take a second to look back at the entire Soul Society arc and the hero's journey that Ichigo finds himself on that is just so compelling in this arc. I personally love how throughout the entire Soul Society arc, Ichigo is just running the gauntlet, facing enemy after enemy, all of whom should be infinitely more experienced and powerful than he is. But it doesn't really matter. This Ichigo is cocky, he's motivated, and he is ready to plow through whoever stands in his way. This Ichigo is just so disrespectful and blatant and headstrong. I mean, he insults Captain Gin Ichimaru without knowing who he is at all, faces people like Renji and Kenpachi Zaraki, knowing only his Shikai, having never spoken to his Zanpakuto before in any real capacity. And the entire time, he is just bulldozing his way through these people, and even when he takes an L, he comes back stronger. You seriously cannot tell this version of Ichigo anything. And for me, that all comes to a head when he completes his Bankai training and shows up at the Sokyoku and the Executioner stand to save Rukia. First of all, his fit is clean.
Muy bien.
I don't know why they never gave him this cape again, but it looks awesome, and it's the only version of Shikai Ichigo, in my opinion, that looks just as cool, if not cooler than some of his later forms. The whole aesthetic is just there. He then goes on to casually hold back the Sogyoku, which is said to have the power of 1,000,000 Zanpakuto with his Shikai blade alone, with no effort. And once the Sogyoku is destroyed, he then goes on to blow up the Executioner stand using his spiritual pressure alone. And he's doing all of this while the other captains and lieutenants are watching on in sheer amazement that someone who just straight up ran through Soul Society from the human world can cause this much damage without any effort. And as Renji is escaping with Rukia, Ichigo goes on to 360 no-scope 3 lieutenants back to back and finesses all of them before the first one even hits the ground. And one of those is the lieutenant of the 1st Division. All of these lieutenants have their Shikai out and armed. Ichigo puts his down and boxes them with his bare hands and lays them all out one after another with 0 problems. Ichigo then has the nerve to not only face off with, but win against Captain Byakuya Kuchiki after just learning Bankai for the first time. I was rewatching this episode with my friend Lucas, and he turned to me and said, "It's really impressive that Ichigo is this strong this early on." And I have to agree. Ichigo is facing a captain level opponent from a noble family with years of experience and practice. And not only does he manage to hold his own, he actually presses Byakuya to use some of his most powerful techniques and wins in a fair battle with no significant interruptions. And yes, while White interrupts for a moment, he doesn't do significant damage that helps out Ichigo in this fight. Aside from all of the epic moments that I just named on the surface level, from a story perspective, this is truly one of Ichigo's greatest showings as a character. In my opinion, this is one of the first times that we are truly drawn to Ichigo because of how magnetic he is. He just can't be stopped. There's no way he should be winning these fights, and yet, not only does he win them, he has this attitude that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how strong you are, I don't care what your title is, I don't care how long you've been doing what you've been doing, I have a mission, and no one is going to get in the way of that mission, no matter what it takes. This is an Ichigo that is confident, that is brash, that is headstrong, and nobody can tell him no. And this is the Ichigo that I love at the beginning of the series. This is essentially an Ichigo that hasn't been touched yet by defeat, true defeat. I mean, he's fought some hard battles and lost some battles, but he has yet to really feel despair and sorrow. So he's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and he just started a revolt in the Soul Society against all odds. This man is quite literally one-shotting lieutenants, holding back a weapon with the power of a million Zanpakuto and facing off against one of the strongest captains in the Gotei 13, and he's doing it like it's nothing. So yes, Ichigo's rescue of Rukia at the height of the Soul Society arc is, in my opinion, the number 5 spot for one of Ichigo's greatest moments in the entire series. Jumping way ahead to the Hueco Mundo arc is number 4, Ichigo's battle against Ulquiorra. Now, when people typically think of Ichigo's battle with Ulquiorra, we remember that fight for 2 reasons. One, how powerful Ulquiorra was in regards to his fight with Ichigo. The difference in their power being quite literally the difference between heaven and earth. The second reason we remember that fight is because of Vasto Lorde Ichigo's appearance in the fight and how he decimates Ulquiorra. However, from a story perspective, Ichigo's fight with Ulquiorra was an incredible moment for Ichigo because it tells us something very important. Ichigo Kurosaki is a man of sheer defiance. Throughout this fight, Ulquiorra is trying to understand why Orihime isn't afraid of him. He's trying to understand why Ichigo continues to battle him despite being very clearly overwhelmed and way out of his depth. The Espada really can't comprehend why they keep fighting despite the facts. And what Ulquiorra comes to learn through Ichigo in this fight is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how outclassed he is. It doesn't matter if the situation is hopeless. He's not fighting because it's clear that he can win this fight or that there's even any possibility that he can win this fight. He's fighting because he has no choice. He's going to win because he has no choice. We see this no more clearly than when Ichigo is getting the living snot beaten out of him and even has a hole blown through his chest. And yet, Ichigo refuses to let go of his sword. And even when it's very clearly over and Ichigo is very clearly dead, he still refuses to give up once he hears that Orihime is crying out for him. Even though it's White that comes to his rescue and transforms him into his Vasto Lorde state, it's Ichigo that's hearing Orihime's voice crying out to him, and it's Ichigo that's forcing himself to get back up. The reason why White is so out of character here, whereas he's typically joking around, laughing like a crazy person, here, he's just a demon. There are no words, no jokes, no messing around. He is out for blood. And I think that's in large part because Ichigo is the one who is driving him in this moment. It's Ichigo's resolve to not give in, to not allow Orihime to be hurt, and to not lose this fight. And of course, as we all know, Ichigo's Vasto Lorde form is freaking awesome. Ichigo's determination to never give up in the face of overwhelming and even impossible odds solidifies this fight as one of the best fights in the entire series. We are now halfway through this list at number 3, Dangai Ichigo versus Aizen. Now, first of all, just look at this man.
Daddy, chill.
On the surface level, this fight is absolutely infamous because of 1, how cool Ichigo looks, and 2, how thoroughly he embarrasses Aizen. He palms Aizen's face like a basketball in order to move him away from Karakura Town, catches his sword effortlessly, takes a full-on Hado 90 Kurohitsugi and pimp slaps it, and then hits him with the most insane one-shot, one-kill move in all of Bleach. But from a deeper story perspective, this is a fight that is marked for Ichigo with painful sacrifice. Flame of Rebirth made a great point in his video where he points out that Ichigo looks tired and sad. And every time I watched this fight, I assumed it was because he was so powerful, he was just bored with Aizen. That was the creator's way of showing that Ichigo is so above Aizen at this point, he really doesn't have to put any effort into fighting him. However, I think Rebirth makes a great point in showing that he's not bored, he's tired and he's hurt. And this is because at the end of the day, Aizen really isn't his fight. Even though we later learn that Aizen is responsible for much of Ichigo's background and the circumstances surrounding his birth and his battles, Ichigo doesn't know that at this point. He's just the villain that's been terrorizing all of Soul Society. And because of Ichigo's unique placement as someone who has never been put under Kyoka Suigetsu's hypnosis, and as the only one strong enough to sense his spiritual pressure, the responsibility falls to Ichigo to defeat him. And in order to defeat him, he has to give up all of his powers. And the sting is even more potent when we consider the conversation he has with merged Tensa Zangetsu in his inner world, where Tensa Zangetsu is literally crying because he knows this is the end for Ichigo, this is their goodbye. And Ichigo is only doing this, he's only forcing Tensa Zangetsu to do this so that he can win a fight that isn't even truly his. In essence, Ichigo truly is a messiah figure here. There are a lot of gospel parallels, and I truly appreciate Rebirth's statement of that. As a Christian and as a man of faith myself, there are some very clear gospel parallels with Ichigo putting himself on the line and losing everything for a fight that truly is not his. I think most people would agree that Ichigo's defeat of Aizen is one of the high points in the Bleach series. This next one might be a bit controversial, but coming in at number 2 is Ichigo's final battle with Kyugo Ginjo. While I know many people dislike the Fullbringer arc for it feeling like filler, this arc is actually incredibly important for Ichigo's development as a character and to the story as a whole. Fullbringer arc is kind of where Ichigo hits rock bottom. Ichigo is finally given the normal life he's always wanted, free of any spiritual powers, only to be forced back into action once his friends and family get attacked. He gets his hopes up again and begins wanting to regain his powers. And he does regain his powers. Swagger! Only to be betrayed by the people who were claiming to help him and to lose everything yet again. By the time Ginjo steals Ichigo's Bankai and leaves him in the rain, Ichigo has been hurt, abused, betrayed, manipulated, and he is done. He has been built up and torn down again several times, and he just bursts out into tears, literally begging Ginjo for his powers back. Ichigo is overwhelmed by grief and sadness, and this moment really hits for us as viewers and for me in particular, because this is what it feels like to lose. And not just to lose a fight, but Ichigo has truly, completely, and thoroughly lost. And while a lot of people don't like this scene because of how weak it makes Ichigo, I love this scene because of how weak it makes Ichigo. At the start of this list, we talked about how Soul Society Ichigo was someone who was headstrong and would not take no for an answer, but bulldozes through every obstacle to get to his goal. By the time the Fullbring arc comes around, Ichigo has been through so much strain, so much loss. He is completely broken. And as any human teenager would, he breaks down into tears. However, once Ichigo gains his powers back, I love that he refuses to be messed with anymore. Several times during their battle, Ginjo tries to manipulate Ichigo once again and turn him and mess with his mind, and it's not even close to working. After being manipulated and toyed with the entire arc, Ichigo is solid as a rock. And when Soul Society themselves come to see what Ichigo will choose once he learns the truth, he doesn't even give it a second thought. He knew something was off the entire time and still chooses without a moment's hesitation to stand with the people he has stood with this entire time. There is no way Ginjo was going to turn his heart at the last minute. That's just not who Ichigo Kurosaki is. And then of course, during the fight itself, it is super entertaining to see Ichigo completely manhandle Ginjo. The entire arc, we all know what Ichigo is truly capable of with his powers, and we watch him have to struggle using his Fullbring powers and submit to someone like Ginjo or Tsukushima. So it is extremely refreshing to see him back at his peak, effortlessly bodying this dude. Love it or hate it, the final battle of the Fullbring arc shows Ichigo experiencing and overcoming true loss. And coming in at number 1 on our list as Ichigo's most iconic moment is the first Quincy invasion when Ichigo shows up as the savior of the Soul Society. During the first few chapters of the 1000-Year Blood War arc, when Soul Society is getting invaded by the Quincy for the first time, Ichigo is basically written to be John Wick. Everybody on the opposition knows exactly who Ichigo Kurosaki is, and they are terrified of his involvement in the battle. Ichigo is considered such a threat and so important to the Quincy that him being trapped in Hueco Mundo was motivation enough for Yuha to mobilize the entire Quincy army to invade Soul Society. And during the invasion, while all of Soul Society, the captains and lieutenants, are getting absolutely annihilated, they all look to Ichigo as their savior. They're telling each other, don't give up, have hope, Ichigo will come for us. They are looking up to him as the hero of Soul Society. It's super cool. And once Ichigo finally does make his way onto the battlefield and pulls up to Soul Society, that man is angry. He one-shots a Stern Ritter on sight, and everybody on the battlefield, Quincy and Captain, looks to the sky in absolute shock and awe at the spiritual pressure that is darting around the Soul Society. They make out Ichigo to be this legendary hero, almost like a monster, showing up on the battlefield. Like everything hinges on his arrival. And perhaps my favorite Ichigo moment of all time is when Byakuya Kuchiki, his first real adversary from way back during the Soul Society arc, is now a bloody pulp. Byakuya is very clearly about to die, and in my opinion, he very well should have died here. He looks at a very battered, bruised, and angry Ichigo, and with what might be his final breath, he tells Ichigo to simply save Soul Society. And this frame right here might be my favorite panel in all of Bleach, because it's so cool watching Ichigo come full circle from the Soul Society arc, this optimistic bulldozer who plows through all of these obstacles, to his fight with Ulquiorra, where he is determined to not give up even though he gets absolutely obliterated, to this reluctant savior type figure, to absolute rock bottom depression and sorrow, to now finally achieving that savior status. And to have Byakuya, who is at this point knocking on death's door, Ichigo's first real adversary, look to Ichigo and leave everything in his hands as the hero and savior of Soul Society. Of course, those are just my thoughts. Please leave yours down in the comments. What are some of your greatest Ichigo Kurosaki moments? I'd love to hear what you guys think. Please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell to join the channel, show that support so I know you guys are vibing with this content and you want more of it. You guys know by this point I love Bleach and I'm gonna talk about it for as long as it's up. So if you guys are with me, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.